Good morning, guys. On behalf of Beefmaster Breeders United, I'd like to introduce you to Bryce Schumann with Vytelle. Used to be known as Grow Safe. Several years back, we started the journey within the Beefmaster breed of testing cattle for feed efficiency, achieving the RFI that the EPD just became put in place after testing close to 3,000 head. We achieved the goal, a milestone, if you will, and something that our cattle do, very, very well at. And we're now kind of, showcasing it. And Vytelle, who's been behind this, 100%, and have educated us as much as we can. We've got a lot to learn about it. We want to share that with the rest of the membership as we go forward. I'll give you a little history on Bryce. Bryce is, he was with. Prior to being with Vytelle for the last year and a half or so, and I'm going to call him, he's in control of Vytelle, at least in my eyes. He was with Thomas Angus. He's certainly been involved in the cow-calf operation for a number of years. Prior to that, he was with a breed of cattle that our cattle do very well with. He was with the Angus Association for about, 15 years, in all various capacities. And so he's certainly, he's a cow-calf operator. He even does some bull testing, he and his family. He's got a couple of kids. He lives up in the Kansas area. And we all want you guys to give him a warm welcome. We're going to let him get up and kind of tell us a little bit about Vytelle and kind of educate us a little better as to what RFI is and on testing these cattle and why it's so important to do so. Again, I'd like to give a warm welcome for Bryce Schumann.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, we're going to have a good morning. I'm excited about this morning. I'm going to make a confession as we get started. I'm trying to be can't think of the right word. I'm a recovering breed association, etc. And I'm one of the few people to talk on your education program that's got an MBA, not a PhD. And so if Dr. White or Dr. Pascal are here, you'll have time for rebuttal at the end, because I've got some strong opinions about animal breeding, but not formally trained. So a lot of my opinion comes from my wife and I have about a 300 head commercial cow-calf operation. I've been involved selecting Hereford Seedstock since 1971. My family, while it's always been a small enterprise, my family's had a little bit of success in selling bulls nationally. We had a sale here 3 weeks ago Sunday. Sold cattle in 14 states, and we've leased about 6 bulls and bull studs. I'm a data junkie, so when we're talking about phenotypes and index selection, well, we're in the middle of my wheelhouse. This is the stuff I love. And so on my own operation, before I came to Grow Safe, I was already testing our bulls for feed efficiency. This fall, they're getting ready to go on feed. This will be my 14th consecutive calf crop. So some of the observations I'll make are not just based upon what Vytelle, or formerly Grow Safe, says we should say about it, but my own observations and experiences in that space. I tell you this, as a breed, you've got a huge opportunity. You've got a breed that provides something that's very much needed by this industry, and that's heterosis. And heterosis is the key. And if we look at our competing proteins, they do a lot better job of taking advantage of heterosis than our industry does. So, topic today, I'm supposed to talk about Beefmasters and feed efficiency. So we'll see if I can run the clicker or not. Maybe I can.
So you're not that confused.
Apparently not. There we go. I read your press release on launching an RFI and feed efficiency index, and I love the headline. Beefmaster commits to sustainability with efficiency EPDs. I'm going to say y'all should be proud that you have an organization that's so forward-looking, because sustainability is more than just a buzzword today. It's real, and as beef producers, we're going to face a lot more questions relative to sustainability, but we have the tools, and I think we've got a positive story to tell, and that's very exciting. Today I want to talk a little bit about Vytelle, just because some of you would have known us strictly as GrowSafe. I'll tell you a little bit behind the merger, the importance of sustainability and efficiency. I promised some of the people in this room yesterday we'd talk a little bit about the science behind RFI, and then some of my own opinions about how to use trial data, EPDs, and indexes. And I think that'll fit very well with what Dr. Pascal and Dr. White talked about. So hopefully we're talking about the same message. This is Vytelle's mission and purpose. We're a precision livestock company, reshaping how cattle producers worldwide unlock animal performance. What do? We try to fast forward genetic progress. This is our mission and purpose. We make individual animal management possible. We try to make cattle producers transform their decision making and bring a new certainty to decisions about performance, health, and genetic progress. And why do we do it? And I think this is the most important thing, is we do this to ensure meat and milk are viable and competitive food choices for the future. As a company, this is what we get up and think about. This is what our efforts are focused around, what we call the triple challenge. And that is, we know that global protein demand is increasing, forecast to increase by 20 to 30% by 2050, which, on that basis should require more feed, land, and water, because we have a growing population and growing demand. Carbon emissions, feed, water availability, land use change. These are top of mind consumer issues today, and are potential limitations for the bovine industry in the future. And we can't talk about sustainability without talking about producer margins. And if we aren't profitable doing what we do, it's not sustainable. And sometimes those are at odds with some of our global demands from the consumer in producing in a sustainable way. Is some of that a communications issue? Yes. Are there things that we can do that where we become better land managers, better users? Absolutely. I've talked a little bit about this, but this is a local, global landscape. The consumer's changing. Certainly, I think we see this today is we're going to get more pressure by government policy. I think that's a given today. We're also seeing a lot of industry issues such as traceability, animal well-being, sustainability, branded beef programs that are beginning to shift the conversation with the consumer. Sustainability is more than just a buzzword. I've talked a little bit about that. A lot of companies that we're dealing with, they're talking about how they can become carbon neutral in their supply chain. Our technology is getting a lot of discussion in the dairy industry today. I was fortunate enough 2 months ago to have a meeting with a large-scale dairy producer who's 100% of their product they produce goes to a large yogurt company, a brand name you'd well recognize, but their goal is how can we become carbon neutral for the yogurt that we provide to the consumer. So it's top of mind for them. It's going to be a higher priority for us. There's more integration in the supply chain, more vertical coordination. We got new trade agreements, traceability is becoming a bigger issue, and of course competition from alternative proteins is certainly a reality. Some of you may have seen this. You know, the Biden administration just released that they want to make a 30% reduction in methane emissions as a goal for the ag industry. I can tell you all animal production produces about 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Is that significant? Yes. Is that a majority of the problem? Absolutely not. We're 10%. But certainly we're going to have more pressure around this space. There is good news though. Our data would say that if you reduce feed intake by 12%, you reduce methane production by 30%, you reduce manure production, NP&K, by 17%. So there's some real advantages, a great story to tell as we improve efficiency. And this is our platform. Today I'm going to focus on Sense and Insight. Sense is our phenotypic capture. The RFI data you're going to use post-trial in calculation of your RFI EPD and your feed efficiency index. That's the phenotypic capture. Insight's the post-trial data. That's what you're using in your analysis. To me, that's the sexy stuff. Collecting the data, that's cool, but it's what do you do with the information once you get it? That's the fun part to me. Advance is our IVF program. I won't focus a lot on that other than a prior speaker talked a little bit about the cow. And if you're using a superior sire on a below average cow, there's probably only so much that sire can do. When you do identify these elite females, one of the things you ought to think about is how you make genetic progress and whether those are animals that you need to use an advanced reproductive technology on. This is our data capture platform. Our feed intake bunks up above, our in-pen weighing system below. This technology captures a weight every second of every day. So those two pieces of equipment are transmitting a weight every second. Now, if there's an EID associated with that weight, we know what the bunk weighed before the animal put their head in there. The EID reader, by the way, is molded into the bunk. And we know what the bunk weighs when they leave. We know how long they were there. We know how many times they went in a 24-hour period to feed or water. And depending on the analytics package that you choose, in some research settings, they really spend a lot of time looking at animal behavior relative to drinking or watering behavior. You might ask, how accurate is it? Our resolution's within 3 grams. So that's very accurate. Like I said, it's measured every second. We have the protocols built into our software. Standardization is a key, and I think when Dr. White spoke yesterday, and she talked about the various ways that your team looked at putting together RFI-EPD for your association. I think the reason using our RFI phenotypes work well is because we're very particular about standardizing protocol. sometimes to a fault. So, but I think that provides us high-quality phenotypes. And any kind of a selection program that you're in, the quality of the phenotypes really, really matter. If you have poor quality phenotypes going in, you can't expect the output to be of high quality. Well, how about the importance of sustainability and efficiency? This is us versus our competing proteins. You know, farm-raised fish are converting at 1:1. Broiler chickens at 1.7 pounds of dry matter to a pound of game. Hogs at 2.9, less than 3:1. You can see 100 years ago there wasn't that much difference between the species, but today, because our competing proteins have put a lot of selection pressure on efficiency, they made big changes, big strides. And especially with the price of corn today, that's very, very important. You know, as an industry, we're excited if we have yearlings converted 6:1 or less than 6:1. We're excited about that. I think we can do much better. Just to talk a little bit about how progress happens. And first, as breeders, we got to define the goals for our program. We collect the information, the phenotypes, the genotypes, the pedigree information. We identify those animals that fit our goals. We identify them as elite and what we're selecting for. We determine how to mate them. We determine the reproductive method, whether we use natural service, AI, embryo transfer. Then we evaluate the process, the progeny, and the process starts all over again. I mean, we're all familiar with that. That's what we do. Why is efficiency important? You know, 10% improvement in average daily gain, and I think everybody in this room would say, man, our cattle gain more today than they did 10 years ago, right? We've selected for growth, growth's important, it's working. In terms of profit, that changes profit opportunity by 18%. If we improve feed efficiency by 10%, we improve our profit opportunities by 43%. Why is that? 70% of our production costs are related to feed. So if we work on the big costs, you know, the opportunities for profit get a lot greater. Why have we made more progress in feed efficiency? Well, until we got genetic evaluations, had we selected, we looked at them. Maybe we could identify one that's later maturing or gain faster just by looking at them. Weights are a lot more accurate. But you can't really look at one and say, this one's efficient. You know, I could point out a cow in my herd that always stays fat. She's nice and cool and always brings in a great calf. The one piece I don't know, is she really easy fleshing or is she just high intake? And most of us aren't measuring how much forage disappears by individual cows. We measure that by groups because we manage our grass and we move them when forage availability is low, but we don't know each animal in that herd and what they're contributing to intake. A lot of different ways to look at feed efficiency, and there was a good question about RFI. If I select for RFI, does that change mature cow size? I'm going to say that our data says that's independent of mature cow size, but I would tell you there's other ways to look at that definitely are not independent of mature cow size. So here's the three ways. RFI, residual feed intake. If we are comparing with the animals with the same gain, those animals that use less feed than we expected, we say are more efficient. If we're using residual average daily gain, we're going to use the same components. We're going to use feed intake and gain. But if we put them all on the same standard where they're eating the same amount, then we evaluate them by the difference in gain. So a residual average daily gain of 0.5, that means they gain a half more pound on the same amount of feed than the average in the pen. So larger is more favorable with RFI, negative is more favorable. Feed yards use feed conversion ratio. One of the things as you select for lower feed gains tends to favor animals that are larger and later maturing. That's not a bad thing in a feed yard situation, but if you're saving the daughter mates, bigger cows may or may not be what you want. And so you just got to bear that in mind. So again, with RFI, we're looking at the animals that eat less than expected at the same level of performance with residual average daily gain. Those that gain more on the same amount of feed. And so how do we define RFI? Residual feed intake is a measure of efficiency. It's calculated as the difference between the animal's actual feed intake and their expected intake from a trial for a given body size and growth rate. A low RFI or a negative RFI is considered efficient. Positive RFI is considered inefficient. It's a moderately heritable trait. I had the opportunity at the reception to talk with Dr. White. I found out that we were on the same page on this. In your data set column, RFI is a little bit more, in a little bit higher heritability than post-weaning gain or yearling weight, and a little lower heritability than carcass traits. And that's how it fits for most of these traits. Now, with that being said, that means we can make a lot of progress in this trait, because we have changed how our breeds, all breeds, perform in terms of growth. And well, we know from the presentation just a few minutes ago, well, we can make a lot of progress in carcass traits, so we're nestled right in the middle of that, and so we can make a lot of progress. Here's just an RFI example. Two animals, one weighing 807, one weighing 780. Similar average daily gain, just 0.02 of a difference. We'd expect their feed intake to be similar, but a little bit different because heavier animals eat a little bit more. And he gained just a titch more. So we'd expect that animal that weighed 807 to eat 21.2 pounds a day, and the one that weighed 780 to eat 20.5 pounds a day. And that's all gathered from the information we collect from a trial group. So this is our phenotypic information, and here's what they actually ate. The one that weighed 807, that animal ate 24.3 pounds of dry matter a day, and the one we expected to eat 20.5 ate 17.5. Quite a difference, right? The animal on the left side of the screen has a plus 3.22 RFI. The animal on the right side of the screen has a minus 2.95 RFI. So there's a little over 6 pounds difference there. What's that mean? You know, on a 74-day trial, if those animals are eating 6 pounds difference for the same level of production, probably at 15 cents a pound, that's probably worth about $70 on trial. So if you're being billed what the cost of the feed is, you got two animals similar performance, one cost you $70 more over the same period. Those are big dollars. So why is feed efficiency important? Well, efficient use of resources is important. What gets me excited is the ability to run a larger number of animals on the same landmass. That's the limiting factor for most ranches is real estate. And it allows us to lower our environmental footprint, provide greater sustainability. Reducing feed and forage input is important to us. Why is that? Like I said, it's 70% of the cost. It gives us a lot better opportunity for profit. And, we're living in a time where we have a lot of industry pressure, particularly around us finding labor. We have limited resources. We're seeing an inflation in our inputs, so we got volatile prices that we're dealing with. And we can't forget about the consumer. They're interested in animal welfare, environmental impact, antibiotic use. So we got to produce more in a sustainable manner. That's nothing new. We've been under the same pressures for a long time. It's probably accelerating though. The good news is this is data from our own database. Change is possible, and there's a great opportunity for change. Out of 49,000, almost 50,000 records in our database, the average for feed and conversion was 7.3 on a dry matter basis. You may say that's high. Conversion's always dependent on rations. Got to think about the population that we're testing. We don't feed bulls like we feed steers. We don't feed replacement heifers. We don't want them to gain 5 pounds a day like we do a steer. We want them to gain a reasonable amount. So their feed conversion is probably going to be higher than feedlot cattle. Standard deviation was 2.4, as we learned in our talk previously. If you plus or minus 2.4, that explains 67% of the population. But if we look at our population, where we look at feed conversion of 5.11 or better, or 4.4% or better, that's 2% of the population. 5% is 11% of the population. If we put our selection pressure out there on the animals we know are efficient, we can make great progress. A 10% improvement in our data set using some feed cost factors of about 2 years ago was worth $65 for every 600 pounds of gain. I tell you today, that's probably closer to $110 for 600 pounds of gain. Those are big dollars, and those are opportunities that we can make. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the science behind RFI. But in all of our operations, we deal with the opportunity of production costs. If we can change savings and efficiency by 20%, that's worth $94 if our annual feed, and that's is $470, and that's just purchase feed. If we can get an animal to breed one cycle earlier, that's worth probably about 70 pounds of weaning weight. If we lose a 2-year-old because she comes up open, gosh, we can't recoup a lot of that production cost. That's a big hickey. So it costs us about $1,200. I'll try not to get too many more technical graphs in the presentation, but these are the different factors that contribute to RFI. You can see one of the biggest ones is in the upper left-hand corner. Protein turnover, tissue metabolism and stress, 27% is other, 10% is digestibility. What does that mean? That means most of this, in terms of RFI, occurs at the cellular level. That's why it's heritable, because it's dealing with ion transport, protein turnover, controlled the nucleus of the cell. So that's 73% of the variation in RFI. So this is occurring at a cellular level. If you're like me, you just want to know, does it work? Here's some data from the University of Missouri, where they've taken progeny of 5 bulls, A, B, C, D, and E. They've looked at the RFI of the progeny. They've looked at average daily gain. They've looked at feed intake as it relates to 400 pounds of gain. That's the cost of the ration at 240. So what it cost, and then the difference in cost of production between those sires. And you can see sire A, he had a $68 advantage in terms of 400 pounds of gain on his progeny versus the mean, and sire E was a -9. There's 27% difference in feed to gain. So there's 27% lower feed cost in bull A compared to bull E. And this was done in a randomly mated study. So as cows came through, they were AI'd to one of the 5 bulls on the rotation, and was repeated till all the cows were bred AI on a synchronized basis. So it's a randomly mated test, and I think that's the gold standard in trying to determine the difference between sires. Oops. If we look at forage intake between RFI phenotypes, again, this was done at the University of Missouri. If we had low RFI heifers, the average of that group was -4.2 versus high RFI heifers. Average was 5.1. Those are extremes. Similar weights, 569, and that's in kilograms versus 557. Intake in kilograms, 12.4 kilograms versus 15.6. Little difference in gain, but it wasn't statistically significant. Those numbers are actually the same numbers statistically. What's that tell us? Low RFI cows consume 20.5% less forage than high RFI cows. If I got a choice and I can identify them, to me, I want low RFI cows because if they produce at about the same amount but eat less forage, that's really important to the stocking density of my ranch. Standardization is important in building an RFI trial to build EPDs out of. You need to have a standardized warm-up period. You need to make sure all the animals in the pen have functioning half duplex EID readers, EID tags that are picked up by the reader. You need 10 to 14 days for them to acclimate to the system, to duration, so we know that they're eating on a regular basis and their intakes have kind of flattened out. And then on a trial, we need 35 valid days of intake. We need 1 valid day in the first 5 and 1 valid day in the last 5. We might say, what's a valid day? Well, we're going to define a valid day as everything with the system worked right. The folks in the field did their job. That means that they didn't overfeed, but there wasn't a lot of empty bunk time. You know, if you had 3 hours empty bunk time in a day, we're going to fail the day because there would have been animals in that 3-hour period that would have eaten, didn't get to eat, and so these are the kind of things that we monitor to evaluate valid days. Any day where we take them all out of the pen, whether that might be to ultrasound them or do something else, we ship that pen up. We like to throw those days out too. And then to do an RFI trial, gain matters. And to be able to accurately predict gain, we need, if you're using chute weights, we need at least 70 days of gain. If we have our end-pen weighing system, we can get Just about the same amount of accuracy, slightly less, but reasonably the same. In 49 days, and you'd say, why could you do that? Well, part of the reason is because every time they go to take a drink, that system is taking a weight every second. If they go to drink 4 times a day and they're 20 seconds a day, we've got 80 seconds worth of weights every day of every trial. And so we can take that information, and that really helps us predict the weight. And predicting weight accuracy is really key to predicting gain accurately. You know, and it doesn't matter whether you're using our system or whether you're using chute weights, Phil makes a difference. And so if you're using chute weights and you weigh them twice on and twice off, it's not unusual to have animals that are 40 to 50 pounds difference between weights. That's really easy to predict. What's a bucket of water weigh? 5 gallon, weigh 8 pounds a gallon, that's 40 pounds. If they drink or don't drink, that's 40 pounds. So predicting weight accurately is important. This was touched on a little bit yesterday. Contemporary groups are really, really important. Internally, here's what we look at. Same sex, similar breed, 8 to 18 months of age, within 90 days of each other and reasonably similar size. We don't want 400 pounds difference in weight. If I'm in college shoes, I'm going to tell you it's really important they were in the same weaning contemporary group, even if there is some variation in weight, because that really gives you the ability to more accurately tie it to your database. All of our trials follow the same standardization, and that allows us to compare EPDs across trials. The standards for data validation, what we consider to be valid days, are the same across all trials. And it's really critical when we're comparing cattle from different origins, different geographical locations. You know, Seedstock producers, we like to talk about the most or the least on a lot of things. We like to compare phenotypic data. You know, my bull had a 1,500 pound yearling weight. Well, if he had a 1,500 pound yearling weight, that's cool, but if the average was 1,470, he wasn't that much different than the average. And so a lot of times the environment that we put them in, that's what proper contemporary grouping and genetic evaluation teases out. Because all this data works around rank. Our previous speaker talked about rank. It's how the cattle actually rank versus how we expect them to rank. And that makes a massive difference in movement of the EPD. And so just remember it's about rank. This is our end of trial reports that we provide. It's a little hard to read, but it's got animal ID, EID, and in some testing centers we're going to feed animals of multiple breeds. So we have breeds, we have date of birth, we have the owners, have what pens they're in, we have RFI rank, residual average daily gain, residual average daily gain rank. We've got starting weights, ending weight RFIs, so a negative RFI, with an above or below average gain on trial, and then those with unfavorable RFIs with the same information. We have the phenotypic averages at the bottom, what the minimum and the maximum for each animals in those trial groups. And I've highlighted, hopefully that's a little easier to see. Single trait selection is bad. I hope nobody in this room disagrees with that. It's bad, it moves us in the wrong direction. So if you're excited about feed efficiency and you say, I'm going to use the best one every time for RFI, well, sometimes maybe they're not the best one for gain. So let's look at the best one in this pen for RFI. He had a dry matter intake of 15.12 and an average daily gain of 2.18. He had a really favorable RFI, but not a very favorable gain. And if we look at the second animal on that line, he had a -3 RFI, 3.11, third best one in the pen. He had a 1.39 residual average daily gain, second best one in the pen. He gained 419 and converted at 4.73 on an adjusted dry matter basis versus 6.9. So if we just looked at RFI, we missed the animal that covered the most bases. So when you're using that information, use balance. This is what your feed efficiency index does. What's it take? It takes RFI and gain together. This is a graphical way of showing it, not from an EPD basis, but from a phenotypic on trial basis. Over here on the vertical axis, the most favorable or most negative RFIs at the top, and the poorest or most positive RFIs on the bottom. Residual average daily gain going across the bottom, so bigger gain. Man, we want all these animals in this upper right-hand quadrant here. Why is that? It's because they were efficient and they gained more than the average. And when we turn that into genetic evaluation, those are the cattle that are going to have the feed index CPDs that we want, because they express growth and they express growth efficiently. And so that's the way to use the information, in my opinion. That's what to look for. And I would even tell you, relative to using dollar terminal when you're selecting for carcass traits and feed yard performance is important. If you can bring that efficiency index into it, then you're going to be capitalizing on the efficiency of gain aspects, not just the gain and the improvement in weight. So if you're selecting for feed efficiency, keep all things balanced. Use RFI in conjunction with your other traits. Like I said, if they got a great minus RFI EPD but look like that, they probably aren't animals you need to propagate. So use it in balance. Some of you may be asking, what animals should I test? Should I test my bulls? Should I be testing my females? Should I test steers? And I would say there's scenarios where we ought to test all of them. If you're trying to identify superior sires, bulls are traditionally the way we've done it. If you have access to a custom testing system or fortunate enough to have your own system, I'm a huge advocate for testing heifers, because that's what I'm going to make my replacement heifer decision on. And if I do find a great one, a true outlier, and she's a potential donor for me, and I can just speed my genetic progress by mating her to a superior sire, and I can cover a lot of bases. If I'm testing steers, I think the best use for testing steers is if you're in a sire testing program. You got 3 sires, you've randomly mated them, you put the steers on feed, test those progeny, find the differences in the sire, turn all that data in, and that really allows you to get greater accuracy on these sires. You know, accuracy is one of the most important things to look at. You know, if you're considering testing animals, custom test locations are an option. I'm going to tell you, with one exception, turn all the data in, good, bad, or indifferent, because the difference in the population moves the difference in the EPD. And if you make excuses for animals that Well, they should have been better than they were. That lessens the spread in the population, so you don't get the description. The only exception I'd make, you get an animal you pulled for health a couple times, they're just not going to be a performer. And they could be better than you think they are. But that would be the only exception I make. And I make that from my own observation and collecting data for 14 years. I've had animals convert as bad as 11.5 to 1. Think about that. 11.5 pounds of dry matter to gain 1 pound of feed, and as good as 3.39 pounds to 1. Now, if you can find those animals that convert 4 pounds of feed to a pound of gain or less, they're profitable in about any market. And one of the things that we've committed to in the breed that my family operates in, they had a random sire testing program. I pay $2,500 to nominate my sire. I send the semen to the test herd. That pays for all the data collection, so we get feed intake and all the carcass data. And that goes into genetic evaluation. And so I'm a small breeder. I work with small contemporary groups. But I can tell you it's really satisfying to me if I identify one in a group of 15 and he's randomly tested against the best of the breed and he still performs, his progeny perform like he performed. It tells me that we can identify him and we're moving in the right direction.
Bryce, that's a Hereford test?
Yes. Yeah. So that bull that gained 3.39 pounds to pound of gain, he was tied for third for cost of gain in his progeny group, and was the high gaining sire group, which he was the high gaining bull when he was on feed, gain of 5.83 a day, and he was the heaviest bull in the group for carcass weight. So all that stuff kind of matches together, and so if you don't have the ability to test 50 or 100 at a time, don't worry about it. Find groups of animals that you can test. But do this, pay attention to accuracy. When we're dealing with small databases, animals can re-rank. And in small databases, I like to look at it in quartiles. Are they in the top 25%, the bottom 25%? Are they part of the middle cut? And if you look at that data like that, there's almost never you find an animal in the top 25% of the breed that's low accuracy that ever goes to the bottom 25%. Now, is he the top 2% like he was when you sampled him? Maybe not. But they might get worse, they might get better. But just pay attention to that. And the other thing that I would say is index values are a lot more important than the individual EPDs because they encompass a lot more traits. You don't get into the problem with single trait selection. I know when you calculated your EPD, fat was important because you said, gosh, we don't want to select for feed efficiency and get really, really lean ones that don't make great cows. Because fat's a great thing for a cow. It helps her reproductively. Cows cycle on being in the right condition and coming up in body condition ahead of breeding. So the other thing that I'd caution you at, and this is tempered by my 7 years as CEO at American Angus and 15 years on their staff, understand the scenario the index is built around. If it's a terminal index, don't try to tell your customers it's a maternal index because it's a terminal index. And maximize that index will bring you what the index says. And if the index is terminal, you get more terminal animals. So if you're seeking balance, make sure you find an index that is developed around balance. And if it's not, make sure in your breeding program you're weighting it with some of the other indexes as well, so that You just don't emphasize one trait over another, unless that's your program. If your program is to make the most maternal or the most terminal, then select for your maternal index or your terminal index. But balance is usually the most profitable. So just understand the scenarios and how they address. I'd be happy to take any questions. Have I thoroughly confused everybody in the room?
I like what you said about fat, and I think in our breed we do it, or we actually rank it backwards. There are rewards thinner animals or newer animals. Which, with our English brethren, of course, they're trying to select against fat, which is not really a problem with us. And I view fat as really critical. In other words, when you look at a group of heifers, you want the ones that develop on grass look better than their mates.
Yeah.
And so I like the way you framed it because it's the opposite of the way the industry typically views it.
Well, I think it's critically important because, gosh, you're hanging them on a rail. Yield rate starts with fat thickness. But what's good for that steer or that heifer in the feed yard doesn't really work on the ranch. Cow has the flesh, have to get bred, have to carry their condition throughout the ups and downs in the forage availability and the quality of the forage you got. Other questions or comments?
Question.
Yes, sir.
On the dry matter that's being used, do y'all have a recommendation of what goes in the bunk? Is it a high protein? Is it probability? Is everybody using the same across the country?
No, globally, we have 160 locations, and they'll be from North America to South America to Russia and Kazakhstan, into the UK. So we got about every kind of ration that you can think of, from high moisture to something that's relatively not very high moisture. The main thing is this. We want a ration that doesn't fall apart, where they can pick through it, so that animals have an equal opportunity to perform. And then we can deal with about any ration, high forage, high concentrate. I will tell you that some of the work done at the University of Illinois says that there's a reasonably good correlation between high forage diets and high concentrate diets, something on the order of better than 0.7. That doesn't mean they're exactly the same, but they move in the same direction. And as animal breeders, that's what we need to be interested in when we're selecting this data and putting it in different production scenarios. Is it going to perform the way we think it is? And over time, that means our sampling is going to be right more times than it's wrong.
No, Bryce, a lot of our members, they're not huge, obviously, a lot of guys have smaller herds, but for testing, especially heifers, I guess, again, my vote for a lot of the guys that have done it, get them in at least with what you said yesterday, something like a minimum of 4 or so heads, where you really get something back within that contemporary group, kind of build something from, and you can actually have some, obviously the data goes into to our EPD, but for that individual to be able to see, get some data back for his personal herd. Kind of touch on that.
Absolutely, and there was some talk about contemporary group size yesterday. And that's where the 4 came from. A contemporary group starts with 2. As an old timer used to tell me, he was asked on a field day when you should start performance testing, and he said, kind of rubbed his chin, and he goes, "I'd guess when you have 2. and there was a follow-up question, why is that? Well, if you got 2, you ought to know which one's the best and by about how much. But as you get more larger contemporary groups, you can explain more variation. Really, I like what Dr. Vytelle said yesterday, because it backed up the data we did internally in American Angus. Once you get to 10, you've kind of maxed out the variation you can explain in the contemporary group. So contemporary groups don't have to be massive. But you need to set yourself up for success. They need to be in the same weaning contemporary group. They need to be handled the same post-weaning before they go on feed. You need to turn all the data back in. That's how you're going to get meaningful output from your association. I would say this, and Larry knows I got a history of being controversial sometimes, so you'll have to beg forgiveness, but we'd like to incentivize your testing, but I haven't had an opportunity to present a proposal to your board and to your staff. But I would say I will do so after the meeting. Our thought process is at a lot of these places where you custom test, there's an enrollment fee to gather all these phenotypes. We try to provide an incentive to do that if it's workable, because that takes a lot of coordination. I want to know the animals you're putting on test are going to provide quality data back to the association. Otherwise, we've gone through the whole process and we haven't gained anything. And we want to encourage people that have systems that provide custom testing to provide custom testing for Beefmaster people. So with that said, I appreciate your time very much today.